Welcome in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mac, John McMullen. This is officially, in my eyes, the last off-season show until next week. We kick off training camp. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Football Friday, brother?
Doing well. Happy, that's something I should have mentioned. Happy ring ceremony day for the Philadelphia Eagles and their fans. So that'll happen tonight. A lot of security around that, so I'm not allowed to say much about it, but it is happening tonight, and obviously training camp's right around the corner.
Is that ring ceremony public, or how do they do that?
No, it's not public. No. Private event.
No. So,
and you can imagine with the kind of bling around that place, you know, they don't want it out there. So, which is understandable. But that'll happen tonight. And I'm sure some of the TV stations will be down for the red carpet and all that kind of stuff. But it is a private event. And they're getting their rings tonight. So that's pretty cool. And there's certain guys coming back. CJ said he was coming back, which I think is interesting on that recent podcast. So, you know, if there are any fences with his teammates that were broken, I think they've been mended. Isaiah Rodgers mentioned he was coming back. So some of the guys are coming back. Some might be in camp. I mean, you know, some might not be able to come back, and that'll be a shame. But obviously, because a stickler, I know already somebody making fun in the chat, but you know, that's the only time that group will be together. That's it.
Right.
You know, the old Fred Shiro quote, "You walk in history together forever." It's the only time. That's it. This is a new group. So it's pretty cool for those guys.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's pretty cool. Ring ceremony tonight. John, a couple of things. We got a great show planned today. With the final show of the offseason, I want to kind of recap. All right, what did the Eagles do this offseason? And then what are the biggest talking points as we get into training camp? So I think we're going to have a great show. We're going to kind of recap everything to get everybody prepped and ready for the offseason coming up, the training camp preview, the recap of the offseason, and then we'll talk about some big picture things as we close out the show. But before we get there, John, I do want to start on a couple NFL pieces. We wanted to discuss Von Miller a little bit more. He signed with the Commanders recently, and you had some thoughts on that. We didn't really have a chance to elaborate on it. Probably my mistake not bringing it up earlier in the week. But, John, the floor is yours to talk about Von Miller and what you think of that whole situation. I know you had some thoughts pre-show that I think the viewers would appreciate.
Yeah, I you know, to me, it's just indicative of the Eagles off season, which has been very disciplined, very consistent. And I think when Nick Sirianni talked to a bunch of us, earlier, he had tried to push the idea of sustained success, which I'm trouble saying, like Bugs Bunny, but he has been pushing that versus repeat whatever, putting what I call a soft ban on that word. And I got to thinking with Von Miller, and I agree with the philosophy as a whole. I think that's the best way to go about it. And I think that's the way the Eagles have gone about it since really 1999, since Andy Reid got here. That was all rooted in his philosophy. But I do think, in the days when they didn't have one, so back to Super Bowl 52, when they felt the window was open, there was a distinct sense of urgency to go get one.
Right.
Now that they got two, I don't see that same sense of urgency. I think the philosophy is more of, we'll get another one in the next few years, but we want to set ourselves up for that sustained success versus, hey, the window's open again, let's go get another one, which it is. But I was thinking about that. I'm like, the old Eagles before would have went, all right, we need a little help here. We might be high on, Nolan Smith tremendously high, and they are. They might be high on Jalen Hunt, and they are. And they might think Azeez Ojulari was not used properly and had some injuries with the Giants, and that's probably true. And Josh Uche still got something left in the tank, and that might be true. All that might be true. But the old Eagles would have went, the window's open. Let's go.
So you think you're thinking in your head here that the Eagles might be going too far with as you
I don't even know if it's too far more than going too far more than just human nature of success.
Right.
Like they don't have the urgency of 0 or even 1 now.
Yeah.
They don't have that same urgency. And like I said, I mean, in the past, there's always a surprise or two, and there's always the Eagles are going, well, I mean, every time there's people, how many TJ Watt stories were there? Oh, they'll find a way. How many Myles Garrett stories? They'll find a way because of their reputation. They didn't do anything. They signed 12 guys all 1 year, $3.5 million the most throughout the entire offseason. And people are still talking about it.
So you're saying the reputation that they've built up, that's ultimately been a major part of the amount of success they've had. Because of that success, you're not seeing that sense of urgency that ultimately got them to this point in this offseason.
Yeah, at least to the same degree of when they didn't have.
Oh, I think that's a guarantee. I mean, I think that's a slam dunk. It's definitely not.
I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying they're not trying to win. They're trying to win. They're trying to win, and that's one of the strengths of this organization. They're trying to win more than most other teams in this league. So I'm not trying to say that, but
a little bit of complacency is setting in because of all the success.
Human nature complacency. Like, I can let out a breath. We got 2. And the philosophy is, again, everybody knows in this league, even though they don't like to talk about it, there's a measure of luck that needs to come along with winning Super Bowls, from health all the way down to a couple breaks here and there and games that we've talked about ad nauseum. Happens to everybody, every Super Bowl champion. Stars have to align. So from a macro standpoint, you sit back and say, well, we want to build this sustained success. We want to be good every single year. So when those stars do align, you're in a position to take advantage of it, which is exactly what happened last season. And it might happen again this season. But that was always coupled with, all right, we're really good. We know we're really good. Let's go for it. Now, they know they're really good, but there are other things they could have done to alleviate the immediacy. And they were very disciplined, and you can argue they're right. And I would argue they're right because of the things coming down the road. Now, you got to balance that because the window's open now.
It's a threading the needle thing. It's a tough needle to thread.
But I do, I was thinking about that when Von signed. Not that I'd advocate bringing in Von Miller, although, he could certainly help this team. And I'm most concerned about edge rushing. And he did go in the division, and maybe it blows up. He's 36 years old. It's short term. I thought Robert Quinn coming off 19 sacks hey, that's a good idea. He didn't do anything. So, Von Miller might not be nothing. The Eagles might have information say, all right, and he's obviously not the same player he once was. But I do see a less sense of urgency. And I think that's related to human nature more than anything else. Got 2. And we'll get another one. Might be this year, might be next year, might be 2 years down the road. They tend to think about things in 3-year increments. But, Carter will be better. Quinion and Cooper will probably be better. Nolan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You haven't even reached the prime of those guys. So,
yeah, I mean, I do think I see the reason for it. And obviously you pointed out that you see the reason for it too. You're just showing, a little bit of a macro thing, but look, their philosophy was to sign the core guys, and they do have a lot of them, John, coming up. So, I do think, as I mentioned, it's a thread the needle thing of you want to push on the right spots, but are they not able to push as much, even if they wanted to? Because, I got asked the question yesterday. If Keely Ringo pans out, that let's say Keely Ringo has a great year this year. All right. Are you paying him?
well, that depends on what type of year. But I mean, if he's an all-pro, you're paying him. I
You're
don't
paying
think
him.
he's
And
going
then
to
you
be.
got
Yeah,
Cooper Quinion. You got Reed Blankenship. You got Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nolan Smith. You got Vaughn in the linebacker. Like, there's a lot, man, on that defense. A lot to pay. So I think I understand the philosophy from the core approach. But do you think the lack of aggressiveness this offseason could end up costing them?
and in the short term, yeah. I mean, I think there's obvious holes and obvious places where there's not demonstrated performance, and you're counting on guys like Ringo to step up, who may have high ceilings. But history says all those guys are not going to step up. So if you want to expand it to Morrow on the defensive front, and Trotter, having to play, and Sidney Brown or Drew Makuba, they're all not going to hit. So, and there's, Howie's proven that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an August trade somewhere along the line after Vic gets to see what he has, not offensively, but defensively.
It would
Trade.
have to be somebody like a Jahan Dotson on defense in terms of contract, right? It would have to
Exactly.
be,
Yeah.
yeah, a cheap contract.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe last year on his rookie deal, hasn't lived up to expectations in his first city. The Eagles think he has upside, that type of thing. CJ trade. Was good, not great in New Orleans. High maintenance guy, and if you're good, not great, or you're going to pay a guy on the a second contract, New Orleans said no, we're not, so they traded him. That type of guy. And I think you might see that later in August this year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to follow. I do think the point is interesting by you and well taken. I mean, the aggressive nature that the Eagles have had that ultimately got us to this level of winning has obviously changed a little bit this offseason. We'll see how it impacts the team moving forward. Johnny Mac, great opening there on Von Miller. I'm happy we brought that up. It's a lot less about Von Miller signing with the Commanders and a lot more about your thoughts on how that pertains to the Eagles. So good stuff there. John, another topic I want to get into before we dive into our final offseason show. Recap the offseason, preview training camp one more time, and we'll kick off training camp next week. I want to talk about Lloyd Howell. All right, he stepped down as the executive director of the NFL.
Can I toot my own horn? I said keep an eye on that. And
yes, you did. You did.
Day
you did
one.
keep an eye on that. Or we did. And he cited become a distraction to the important work the NFLPA advances every day. I'm sure you have a litany of thoughts on this topic. It's an interesting one with the Carlisle Group and his consultancy with them, and how they relate to the NFL and all of those different things. Your thoughts on Lloyd Howell resigning, John, from the NFLPA?
Well, had to happen. I mean, for all that talk about the collusion grievance, and I use that term liberally, but it was reported wrong, and I said it at the time. The big issue was the NFLPA aspect of it, and the fact that it's clear that the leader of the NFLPA was not holding the best interest of his constituency. Can't speak to this morning. At the top of the forefront, and that is just a brutal story from the NFLPA standpoint. The lack of transparency, players not being alerted to agreements between the head of the Players Association and the league. That's the collusion that went on. So the NFL is probably upset because they had somebody in their pocket, basically, to ship things in their direction. Now, because of what went on, I mean, he was elected in a very secretive process with basically no transparency for most of the NFL's players. And now it's 2 years later. Usually, D. Smith was around for years, and it's ridiculous how quick it went off amid scandals and conflicts of interest. And this is a disaster for the NFL Players Association. And it's embarrassing that they let this guy be the head of it. I think the majority of players would have voted in a different direction if they were informed. Hopefully, it shines a light on the need for that transparency, because this union is embarrassing compared to the baseball players and the basketball players. It's embarrassing. And I'm not talking about the bullshit that you'll see every year during NBA free agency about how much Shea makes or somebody like that. That's a math problem. There's 70 players in the NFL. I'm not talking about that bullshit.
Yeah, right.
That's just low-hanging fruit to upset people. I'm talking about fighting for the players. And I'm not talking about quality of life issues, because that's all they fought for. And that was done by design by the NFL, because they're willing to give up that kind of stuff as long as they can get more money, more games. But yeah, Lloyd Howell should be ashamed of himself.
It's a disaster, and it's awful for the players. I mean, so he steps down officially. What's next for that situation? How do you?
Hopefully they have a better group of candidates. Number one, and I'm not. I mean,
you mentioned though he got elected in kind of a I don't know if it was like a covert operation, but
it pretty much was.
Yeah, I mean, how did that happen? And then what do they do this time that would?
Well, they almost have to keep it transparent this time, so that's good. Because the NFL, they kept the media dark. Forget about the public. Obviously, the players, the old union, they didn't know what was going on.
So the union that's supposed to be protecting the players didn't even keep the players in the loop on things that mattered that were affecting the players.
Yeah. Well, but to the example of the story that Pablo Torre broke and Florio picked up on, right, which was the they were kept. They didn't know. They're supposed to be made aware. And don't get me wrong, of the, I don't know, 2,500 NFL players, however many there are, the vast majority are not going to be interested in stuff like that. And they just, that's why they, have people like JC Treader and Warren Burks and people like that to represent their side of it. People are interested and more well-versed. They kept it secret from those guys, not Treader. Treader's part of it, but they kept it secret from the players, the agreement. Like right then, I said that day, he's got to go. I didn't think it would happen this quick.
Yeah, it happened quick. This was a couple of weeks ago we talked about this.
Yeah. But that day, I literally said he's got to go. So hopefully that forces more transparency. But considering it is the most popular sport, that's where it comes in with baseball and basketball. You should have more power than the baseball players. You should have more power than the basketball players because of the popularity in the NFL. They do not. They lag so far behind. And it's a shame, and hopefully they fix it. But it's got to be better than what went on this time. They went too far, the NFLPA. and hopefully that'll force them to make some much needed corrections, I would say.
How bad is the wreck for the next guy that comes in? How hard is this going to be to repair?
I think it makes it easier for him because, well, I think the NFL is upset because the next guy that comes in, I think it makes it easier for him to fight a little bit harder. You know, and Jake Rosenberg tweeted some things, you know, as a former, and remember, he's on management side. And I wanted to pull up because he said some interesting things from the perspective of someone who worked for a club but cares deeply about the players and their welfare. People can roll their eyes, but I think that's true in the case of Jake. They need and deserve a better NFLPA, which is 100% true. Generally speaking, agents protect them far more than the union, yet are treated like the enemy. Always seemed weird. And he's 100% right. And then he put the thing that comes to mind about lots of NFLPA advice to agents on matters impacting players can be summarized as tripping over dollars to pick up pennies.
If agents are protecting the players more than the NFLPA is protecting the players, then the NFLPA has officially been is useless. It's become useless.
Not to the league.
Well, obviously, but that's who wants to control it. The idea of it is to fight back on that.
Exactly. And that's why when everybody focused on the NFL, I was like, we know what the NFL is. That's not a story. The story is the NFLPA.
Right.
And that's the way it shook out. But look, they're going to have to be more transparent this time. So that'll mean a better candidate to fight back against the NFL. And ultimately you want a partnership, and then when the NFLPA fixes its house, then you can go back to the NFL and say,
exactly.
All right, these are,
What's the election process like with that? Like what would transparency look like? Do we even know, or?
No, we don't know. We'll see how they handle it. But I'm sure there's going to be, if they try to be as secretive as they were last time, I'm sure there's going to be much more pushback from not only the media, but also the players themselves.
Yeah. We'll see what ends up happening with that. Lloyd Howell resigns from the NFLPA, and John brings up a pretty decently sized problem there with the players. And that reads out that Jake Rosenberg quote. That's interesting about agents care far more about protecting the players than the union, which again, in my eyes, would effectively deem the union largely useless to the players, which is not a good thing. We'll see how they fix that.